Good afternoon. Today is Friday, the 31st of May, 2024, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. Delighted to have Ben Rubin with me in the studio.
Delighted to be here, Brian.
Thank you for joining me. We've also got Debi Evans, who is down in Cornwall, England. I'm going to add to that. And we have a guest today, which is James Roguski. We're going to kick straight off with the Trump court case. I couldn't resist this because here's the BBC headline: Trump rages at verdict as he's found guilty in historic case. First former or current president. I don't think the BBC is too sure where he stands at the moment, but it's about his conviction felon, question mark, because of course he hasn't been convicted yet. We've just had the result on 34 counts in the trial of guilty. Hush money trial, courtroom turned to stone, and BBC reporter in court describes Trump's reaction after guilty verdict. BBC biased as always and completely overjoyed. I just wanted to pick up on this, which I thought was really quite interesting. It was comment by the Manhattan District Attorney, Alvin Bragg, who brought the charges against Trump. And we'll hear a little bit of a video clip of him speaking in a minute. Of course, Trump himself had replied saying, "I'm a very innocent man." He's more innocent than innocent. He's very innocent, but at least he's making the point. Let's listen to the video clip of District Attorney Bragg speaking.
First and foremost, I want to thank the jury for its service. The 12 everyday jurors vowed to make a decision based on the evidence and the law, and the evidence and the law alone. Their deliberations led them to a unanimous conclusion, beyond a reasonable doubt, that the defendant, Donald J. Trump, is guilty of 34 counts of falsifying business records in the first degree to conceal a scheme to corrupt the 2016 election. And while this defendant may be unlike any other in American history, we arrived at this trial and ultimately today at this verdict in the same manner as every other case that comes through the courtroom doors. I did my job. Our job is to follow the facts and the law without fear or favor. And that's exactly what we did here. And what I feel is just gratitude to work alongside phenomenal public servants who do that each and every day. I did my job. We did our job. Many voices out there. The only voice that matters is the voice of the jury, and the jury has spoken.
Well, I just wanted to say to our audience today some very interesting words there, important words. I don't know whether Trump got a fair trial, but one thing we must never lose is the jury trial. The jury trial, immensely powerful. In UK, at least, not only can the jury, of course, find somebody not guilty, they can find somebody not guilty even if they have broken the law. This is something that jury members often do not know, and very often they are controlled by the judge in the court hearing. So I just want to echo back to the audience that at the end of the day, if it's a fair trial without any form of favoritism and a jury is in place, that is very powerful. I don't know whether that was the case in Trump's trial, but for people who worry about law and order and justice in UK and other countries adopting our judicial system or our legal system, it's the jury which has the power in the court. And of course, this is the reason why there is no jury in family courts when the family courts take children away from their parents under false pretenses. I'll leave that one there, but leave the audience to have a think about that. Debi, let's bring you in. Thank you for joining us today. And I think you're going to tell us about the World Health Assembly.
I am. Thank you so much. And hello, everybody. I'm delighted actually to be joined by James Roguski today, who's joining us very early, his side of the planet. So thank you, James, because we're going to be catching up over what's going on at the World Health Assembly this week, because as everybody knows, the United Kingdom have no sitting parliamentarians at the moment. We have no discussion. We have wall-to-wall mainstream media of electioneering, and we're not getting to hear about what's going on at the World Health Assembly with regards to the WHO Pandemic Preparedness Treaty. So James has very kindly agreed to give us a quick snapshot of what we, the British in particular, need to know. Welcome, James. Thank you so much, and over to you.
Well, thank you very much for having me. And like any other good, murder mystery, there have been many plot twists at the end. And, as I'm speaking to you today, they should be starting meetings in Committee A of the World Health Assembly to discuss a number of things. And the very last thing on their current schedule is items 13.3 and 13.4, which are the quote unquote pandemic agreement and the amendments to the international health regulations. I fully expect that they might go deep into the night discussing what's going on, because earlier in the week, there were 3 separate draft resolutions proposed. One of them was by France, Indonesia, Kenya, New Zealand, Saudi Arabia, and the United States, which essentially was connected to, on Tuesday, they started a drafting group to continue the negotiations right up to the bitter end. And so as we speak, the delegates are negotiating to try to hammer out a final agreement on the amendments to the international health regulations. We shall have to just wait and see this evening. People can, if you do a search for WHA 77, you should be able to stay up late tonight and watch the live stream to see what happens. It may carry over into tomorrow. Tomorrow is supposed to be the final day when they take some of their final votes and close the session on June the 1st. And there are certain amendments of which I am personally very concerned and paying very close attention. Articles 24, 27, and 31 involve international travel. And what's going on there is with Article 31, it states very clearly that when you leave your country and you're traveling to another country, the officials there have you over a barrel. They can, according to the existing regulations, it forced people to go through a medical examination, prophylaxis, whatever it is nowadays that they call a vaccine, isolation and quarantine. And the terminology that they use is that they can compel people to do that. Now, they actually want to strengthen that by having the conveyance operators, the airlines, the cruise line, the train or bus or whatever type of travel you might be going on, to enforce that, on board when you're embarking or disembarking. So locking down international travel is one of the areas where I want to make it clear, this is not the WHO mandating such things. It's all of the nations agreeing to exert their national sovereignty in order to inflict, their will upon the rights of individual travelers and your bodily autonomy. So we shall see if they manage to reach an agreement on the amendments. Now, there were 2 other proposed draft resolutions, one from the 47 member states of the African region, and one from Australia, Brunei, Canada, Norway, and Pakistan, which essentially seems like they're not going to reach an agreement on the quote unquote pandemic treaty or pandemic agreement. And it looks like they are going to call for either a special session of the World Health Assembly later in 2024. Some nations have called for, maybe push it off until next year's scheduled assembly, next May in 2025. The United States said, we're going to need more time than that. So stay tuned. It's a soap opera as the WHO turns. We will hopefully find out tonight or tomorrow morning what they have decided. While everyone is distracted by everything else going on in the world, they'll be staying up late tonight and early tomorrow morning to make decisions about, the future of the health of the world.
James, thank you so much for that. And I have to say to all of our viewers and listeners as well that whilst half the planet is sleeping, James never seems to sleep. So if you don't catch the WHO during the night tonight, then please go and check out James's Substack, because he keeps it so up to date with literally the latest news. So James Roguski Substack, please go and look at that. And James, thank you so much. We'll be catching up next week to do a massive, great big in-depth post-mortem. So thank you, James, and enjoy your day.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, James. I'll just say to our audience, of course, James has to be up, I think, about 3:30 in the morning to give you that short report. So we're going to say thank you very much for the dedication. Debbie, you're going to take us on through into the World Health Assembly.
Yeah, I am going to stick on that just for a second, because Mike on Monday showed Tedros at the World Health Assembly, and he did make a very good observation. Look at the lapel badge that we have on Tedros's suit. It seems to be antimicrobial resistance. So just hold on to that thought, because AMR is going to be something that we're going to be talking about a lot moving forward. But he was there and he was presenting the prize, a prestigious prize, to Professor Katalin Kariko, and also to her colleague, Professor Drew Weissman, for their prestigious scientific work, which has enabled the development of mRNA. So I thought, well, she's got all these prizes. Let's have a look at Katalin Kariko. She is the vice president of BioNTech, and her career has been focused really on RNA and mediated mechanisms, with ultimate goal of developing in vitro transcribed mRNA for protein therapy. This was originally a genetic product. She's from Hungary. And basically, she couldn't get any funding for any of her research because it was deemed too dangerous. Catastrophic, I think, is what Cheryl Granger, our dear colleague and friend, described it as. So how did she land up at BioNTech? Because she couldn't get any research funding in Hungary, so she went to the United States. And I caught up with this article from the Daily Pennsylvanian, and it says, "Not of faculty quality, how Penn mistreated Nobel Prize-winning researcher Katalin Kariko." Well, Penn is actually a university. It's an Ivy League research university in Philadelphia. And I went on to look in the article and have a look and see what they say. It's quite extraordinary. Her colleague, David Langer, who convinced Penn to take her, said she's incredibly hardworking. She's just insane. She had her lab space removed because her work was just deemed non-fundable. She kept getting kicked out of the laboratories, and even to the point, actually, where her belongings were packed up and she was sent on her merry way. So Katalin Kariko was effectively thrown out of universities, and that's how she landed up at Penn, at BioNTech, excuse me. So I've gone to look at the transcript of her prize-winning speech. You can see there the slide transcript for an interview with Katalin Kariko, and we're going to be having a look at that in a minute. But after all that I've said just there, let's just hear it from Katalin Kariko herself. Have a listen to this.
Doing science is so much fun. For 20, 30 years at the University of Pennsylvania, where I work, I know that people consider me unsuccessful. I was demoted from my position, and eventually 10 years ago I was terminated. I felt successful because in the lab I was in full control. I did another experiment figuring out something, and I could see the progress, and it was fun.
So this is a woman that's described as insane, right? So I went back to her Nobel transcript, and I'm just thinking maybe she's a little confused. So when she was asked how she would spend the money from her prize, listen to what she said, and keep an ear out for the word brag. Have a listen.
Most likely I would spend the money for education and helping, students. I don't really like to brag about things, but all of the award I got, in Hungary, I never took out from the country. I gave to, organization like helping underprivileged children.
So she doesn't like to brag. Well, I'm a little confused because in the next question, when she's describing how she met her colleague, Professor Drew Weissman, well, I'll let you make up your own mind. Have a listen to the word brag again.
I used to work at cardiology department, which belonged to the cardiology section, which belonged to the Department of Medicine. But then from there, I moved to surgery department, which is a different building, adjacent building. But I know the code for the Xerox machine only in the medicine. Surgery, where I worked, had no Xerox machine. And we always had to Xerox copy the scientific articles. So I keep going back to the prior place, and then I could see this guy I had never seen before, and then I introduced myself because I kind of like to brag, and I told him what I am doing, why he was Xeroxing. He's very quiet, and so I mentioned him that I work with mRNA, and he said that he came from Anthony Fauci's lab. At that time, it didn't ring any bell for me, Fauci. It was not in the television all the time. And then he said that he wants to make a therapeutic or prophylactic vaccine for HIV. And we started to talk more. And then I told him that I can make mRNA for him. And then he gave me the genes, and I cloned and I made RNA, and we started to work together. So it is true, we met at the Xerox machine, but that part that we were wrestling and fighting, that was not true.
Amazing what goes on at the Xerox machine, isn't it? While she's mixing and cloning and making up mRNA, which I would like to say was classified a genetic product. And then when she went to BioNTech, it miraculously became a vaccine. These are the words from a woman who no one would fund, who was actually got rid of and was by her own colleague called insane. That's who won the Nobel Prize for mRNA.
And Debbie, we're now at the point where our lives are in this woman's hands through the work that she's doing now. Just incredible. Thank you very much for bringing that to our attention. And I'm sure many people in the audience today will be simply stunned at the quality of the people who are supposedly looking after our well-being and health. Well, are the pharmaceutical companies up to the B standard, do you think, Ben?
I think they probably are, to be honest with you. Yeah, we're going to talk about the letter B today and how it relates to global fascism, specifically as it's linked to these four organisations: the B Team, Be Good for Leaders, B Corporation, which you'll be familiar with, we've talked about it before, and the Better Business Act. And they present themselves as distinct from each other, right? So these are not the same organisations, but they are part of an ecosystem, and they are very clearly linked behind the scenes, and not just by the second letter of the alphabet, which is in all of their names. So I'm going to start by referring you back to this gentleman. This is Paulus Gerardus Josephus Maria Pullman, KBE, aka Paul Pullman, who was the chief executive of Unilever, amongst other things, one of the biggest consumer goods companies in the world. And he now holds 20 concurrent positions, including a trustee of the Rockefeller Foundation, an SDG advocate working on behalf of the UN. He's chair of the Oxford Said Business School, founder of Imagine, which I spoke about in depth a couple of weeks ago, who are reshaping the global food system. And he is also a leader and formerly chairman at the B Team, which is the first of those four organisations that I'm going to talk about. So what is the B Team? They describe their mission as to catalyse a movement of business leaders driving a better way of doing business for the well-being of people and planet. We can recognise a lot of the language here if you're a regular viewer of The column, they've been around for just over 10 years. This came from their website. I'd recommend going to read this report. It's the B Team at 10. And they described their journey from 2013 to 15 as forging a new path for business. They launched with a stellar cast of philanthropists, business people, political leaders, Richard Branson, Arianna Huffington, Mo Ibrahim, Mary Robinson, former president of Ireland, Ratan Tata, were in the mix. From 2016 to 2018, they were partnering for impact. And partnering is the 17th SDG. This is all very closely linked into the development or the delivery, of the Sustainable Development Goals. For 2019 to 2020, they were leading with humanity at the heart. And you can see there Mark Benioff, the Salesforce CEO, on the left-hand side there. And he's also a member of Linda Rothschild's Council for Inclusive Capitalism. So this is part of that same network. And then from 21 to 23, they were catalyzing new leadership. They put a big statement into, I believe it was the New York Times, asking Joe Biden to become the climate president. So they are activists. They're promoting a very specific agenda. And how do they do it? They have a compass. This is what guides them. They're about being bold, brave, working with purpose, having principles, delivering sustainability, equality, and accountability, and most importantly, focusing on humanity, putting humanity at the center, or maybe in the crosshairs. Who knows? It could potentially maybe a slightly sinister dynamic to this too. Now, what do they do with this tool? They use it to guide what they call radical collaboration. So you can see the tool on the floor there in the center, all of the participants in this group. You see Richard Branson sitting there and a bunch of other people that we've already talked about. And essentially, they're coming together to formulate policy, develop ideas, and then disseminate that down out into the organizations they work with and for, and some of them which they own, but also more broadly into the system. Now, they don't do that themselves, right? This is really important. This is a network that we're looking at. They're interconnected with each other, and they signal to each other, which is where the B is really important. Second organization is this one, B for Good Leaders Summit, and this took place in Amsterdam last week. Lovely little bit of one-eye symbolism there, I think, in the logo. That's a bit blatant, isn't it? And what are they about? So again, it's business for good. Business must be for good. So they say, finally, business for good is becoming the zeitgeist. It's clear that business has to change and economies have to become regenerative. But who is taking the lead? Well, they're taking the lead, right? They put themselves in the driving seat for this. They talk about their community to do more business, creating more impact. They get involved to fund or get funded, right? This is about bringing capital into the conversation. It's a place where inspiration and intelligence is shared. So this is about a marketplace of ideas, a very tightly controlled marketplace of ideas, a place to connect with like-minded leaders, build out your network, and also to get exclusive access to events, building the new paradigm. They believe that they are building a new economic paradigm, right? And the B movement sits absolutely at the heart of this. So who was at this event? This took place last week, right? So this was in Amsterdam last week. Who was there? So it was a lot of people. But the first one that caught my attention was Imagine. So this is the Paul Polman group that I spoke about a couple of weeks ago, who are transforming the global food system. They were very excited to be there, talking about inspiration, social capital, natural capital, and financial capital. Right? This is a completely new mindset for how business is being delivered. Who else was at the event? They had a bunch of WEF partners, so this is very closely linked into the World Economic Forum. This is a director from KPMG in Switzerland who was speaking. So this is very much about financial services, climate and sustainability, and creating the regulatory environment and the reporting environment to embed sustainable business practices down into the way that things are happening in the market. And this was also directly connected to one of the other Bs that we've talked about. So this was from one of the breakout sessions. And you can see that the title here is Global and Regional Trends on Impact Investing. Yes, this is about money transforming the system. And the question is, what is offered to B Corps? Yeah, so we've got the B leaders, the B team, the B for Good Leaders Summit, and now we have B Corps at that event, right? So these things are intrinsically linked to each other. And let's remind ourselves very quickly about the B Corp movement and what they are about.
Throughout history, humankind has created a multitude of different economic and social systems. And while systems are complex, The truth is they were built by people, so they can be changed by people. We can transform from profiting only the few to benefiting all. From extraction to regeneration, and from individualism to interdependence. It is not an unreachable ideal. It is the reality that we, the B Corp movement, are already building. Together, we're transforming the global economy to benefit all people, communities, and the planet. Together, we'll realise our vision of an inclusive, equitable, and regenerative world. Join the movement.
Well, Ben, if I may, a couple of our audience already picked up on the fact that it's very common purpose, like you've got people playing games together about very big and serious subjects. So I noticed that straight away, important people sitting around playing a game together. That's to do with reframing them, whether they realise that or not. But the other thing is we should trust these people because they've abandoned the suits and ties and they've gone the other way. They're in their scruffy denims. They're all looking remarkably casual. So there's a lot of manipulation of the public, even in the way they're presenting this B initiative, in my view.
Absolutely, yes. And they're wearing jeans and trainers now, but they're still being paid by the same people. Ultimately, right? So nothing's really changed behind the scenes. So that was the B Corp movement, and actually, you know, I mean, this little screen grab that I took, I think says it all, right? So what have we got? We've got a globalist flag. I'm not even going to talk about the ideologies behind it. It's about climate justice. It's about BLM, so neo-Marxist political movement and delivery of the Sustainable Development Goals. You can see there on the right-hand side. I think that encapsulates it perfectly. And they're attempting to push this agenda not just into the way that business is done, but really importantly into the regulatory structures in the UK. Right? Let's hear from the Better Business Act.
We mean business. Never has there been a more critical moment for humanity to be at its best.
Businesses have to decide, keep being part of the problem
or become part of the movement to create a better future.
We have to update the rules of business today.
Instead of hiding behind the broken models of the past,
we have to stop overproduction and overconsumption from threatening our natural world and everyone in it.
And we have to build a table where everyone is invited to pull up a chair.
Thousands of businesses are already reaping the benefits of making these changes.
But to have a tangible impact, every business needs to do it by default.
The Better Business Act is here to make that happen.
Prioritising people and planet alongside profit
still delivers attractive returns for shareholders.
Which means it isn't just the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do.
Right now, the UK economy is in a state of chaos, and this is our opportunity to harness the enormous potential of entrepreneurs, enterprise, and innovation to jolt it back into action.
The case for change works in everyone's favour.
So we know what we need to do.
We back the act.
Will you?
So very polished, bunch of very high-profile people on there. Mary Portas on UK television. So this is getting really a big push from the establishment. It was launched, actually they had an event last week at the Barbican, Better Business Day. You can see there Holly Branson, Richard Branson's daughter on stage. He was part of the B team that we talked about a few minutes ago. Just very quickly, their website is 33% more carbon efficient than other websites. I thought that was an interesting thing for them to pull out. Anyway, and they also have a glowing recommendation here from Paul Polman himself, which ties it back to the B team again, directly, despite the fact they don't talk about themselves as coming from the same organisation. So for my money, the B Corp, B for Good, the B team, the Better Business Act, they all present as separate, but they are linked, all pulling in the same direction towards greater control of humanity. The question is who's pulling the strings? And actually, I think that it probably goes back here.
Right, that's on, just on to the next one. No problem, Ben.
Okay, well, I think it goes to the Rockefeller Foundation, I believe. So.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Chaos was mentioned. Chaos, as far as they're concerned, is an opportunity. Is it a coincidence, of course, that members of the Conservative Party many years ago were talking about planned chaos in the future? Could it have been to give them that opportunity? Let's move on. If you like what the UK column is doing, then please join us. And for a mere £5 a month, you get all of UK column news, interviews, seminars, many other things. So this is less than a pint of beer, less than a certainly main course Chinese meal, and many other things now have overtaken us in value. So think about it, and if you can contribute with a monthly membership, that would help us enormously. Share the material, that's why it's put out, and I'll just remind people that at the moment we can't engage with Facebook. They seem to have locked us out. We're working on that. And if you want to make a purchase from the shop, that will also help us a lot. Now, an important announcement here, because Sunday, the 6th of June, at 10 a.m., we're doing a virtual UK column conference. We're going to be talking about ourselves, about the UK column, how we started, how we've been doing what we've been doing, some of the enjoyable things around what we do, some of the things that are not so good. We decided it's time to really talk out to our audience about what we do and how we do it, and we'll give you more information about this in due course. Now, just a little sad one here. We've got a short video clip which is up on the UK column, which is the anniversary of the passing of Arnie Burkhardt on mRNA vaccines. So encourage people to go and see the text, but also to re-watch the video as a man who did a huge amount. Now, we've also got this one about the control group in relation to health. Debbie, can you take us through that a little bit?
Yes, well, the control group, it's a choice. It's a parallel system, and I'd really, they're looking for a million to sign up. So it's on the front of the website now. Please go and have a look at it. And there's the choice. You have to make your own choice.
Okay, thank you very much for that one. And this one here is the event, Classic Grand, the event on Sunday, June the 2nd, 2024. This is in Glasgow, and this is a fundraising event for those that have been injured by the vaccine. Our very own Professor Diane Rasmussen-McAddy will be there in attendance. She's got VIP access to the speakers, so we're looking forward to her reporting back on the news on the following Monday. But if you can get involved with this, the aim is to help raise money, and obviously buying a ticket is one of the basic things to do. So have a look at the website if you need more. Now, this is just a lovely little letter that we received, beautifully written, and it made us laugh. It said, "Dear Mike and Brian and all at UK Column News, on Monday you discussed a book by Mariana Spring called Among the Trolls, My Journey Through Conspiracy Land. Diane read it for us. I joked that rather than buy it, I'd pay the £15 not to read it. So that's what I've done. I enclose a cheque for UK Column News for the £15 that the book costs on Amazon. All power to your elbow." So I'm going to say thank you very much for that really wonderful letter. It made us laugh. And yeah, there we go. Now, we'd also like to say a very big thank you to the Light newspaper and their team for the wonderful weekend, last weekend in Cumbria, which was a fantastic 3 days for the UK column of music and chatting and laughter, discussion, most of it just relaxing, but some of it a little bit serious. We had the UK column shop, Kenny and Claire here setting up with some of the items for sale. Team photograph a little bit later after we'd been joined by Charles Mallet and his family. Weather not too good, as you can see, but it didn't dampen things down at all, except in a rather wet way. This was the view out of the shop. That's a very small part of the campsite, so we think about 2,000 people there. really well organised and great fun. Let's take you on to another shot. Spectacular scenery all around us. And as I say, many, many happy families around. Some of the tents there, some of the tents were on site for people to move in straight away. Others came equipped. So there we are. We've got another event coming up. This is the Sounds Beautiful Festival 2024. This one's in Dorset, and that's coming up in June. So I'm looking for the date there. Where are we? June the 27th to the 30th. So that's another event. UK Column will be attending if you can get there. We look forward to seeing you. Now, one of the important things that came up at the Light Festival were many people talking about Independence Day, 4th of July, and the need to vote for independent candidates to try and break through politics in UK. So here we are with the Gloucestershire team of independents who kindly sent us a little image to help promote what they're doing. But many people now deciding not to go near the political parties and standing as independent, even when teamed up with a group of other independents, I think, Ben, is a great way to go. Now, let's move on to serious things. And Ukraine. Well, Ukraine, of course, is still a dreadful war with men and women being slaughtered on the battlefield. But as far as the BBC is concerned, the bloodshed isn't going in the right direction. So I'd just like to point out to you that Ukraine has now slipped to the 6th place in the BBC's priorities. It was, of course, right up at the top. But now, oh dear, the Ukrainians are fighting, but they're losing. So the BBC's dropped them down the scale. Now, I thought what I would do here is just show you some of the clips of the brutality of the fighting and the rise of drones. So we've got a picture here of a vehicle trying ultimately to hide in the tree lines. It's remarkable that in 2024 on this major battlefield, we still have troops trying to hide amongst the foliage of the trees. But of course, the drones are hunting them out on both sides. And this is particularly brutal. Here's a drone strike, and you can see the sheer power of it. This is another image. In this case, it's a vehicle getting hit by a very accurate artillery shell. And of course, men dying as we watch that video. This shot from a drone gives us some idea of the bombing, the scale of the bombing in defended positions. So you can see big hits by the Russian guided bombs to the left of your picture. But also you can see the countryside, which is a mix of these open fields, residential areas, low rise, and the tree lines. Here we've got another shot of the sheer power of the munitions which the Russians are now using, extremely accurate. So these are taking out strongholds of the Ukrainians within the low-rise areas of villages. And this one gives us an idea of what happens when an attack goes in on one of the so-called strongholds, which is high-rise buildings that the Ukrainians are usually using as some form of defensive position. And I have another shot here of immense power as weapons are dropped along a tree line. And you might be astonished to know that that short tree line formed one of the major Ukrainian defensive positions to the north of the country and was fought over viciously for several days as the Russians tried to move south towards Kharkov. So there we are. But this one really is it's terrible to watch. This is a drone actually hunting one individual Russian soldier. This is happening on both sides of the line. He's firing it with a purpose-built battlefield shotgun, effectively, but eventually he runs. And in this particular instance, this man survives, as you'll see when he gets up on the shadow on the ground. But this is the reality of the West's support to the Ukraine war, allowing individuals to hunt other human beings. It's truly disgusting. And this one is a very sad clip. It's been heavily censored, I'm pleased to say, before it was put out on social media. But this is the Russians finding that the cellars of many buildings in these areas are simply full of Ukrainian dead. So that is the background to this horrific war. If we stop the weapons to Ukraine, the war would stop overnight, but that's not the West's plan. The West's plan is to increase the bloodshed. Let's have a listen to Boris Johnson speaking to the Azov Brigade.
Thank you to the heroes from the Azov Brigade who have asked about their presence tonight. Give the Ukrainians what they need. Give them the weapons. Give them the authorization to use those weapons outside their own borders if necessary. Now, absolutely ludicrous that Ukrainians should be forbidden from doing what Putin is doing himself and attacking Ukrainian forces. Why on earth shouldn't Ukrainians be able to attack Russian forces mustering on their borders? Give them those weapons, give them the attackers, give them the budget, give them the air defences that they need. It's the single best investment that we can make in the defence of the whole Euro-Atlantic area, is supporting Ukrainian heroes. We rely wholly on heroes such as the people who are here tonight with us from the Azov Brigade.
So, Ben, some of this is just difficult to describe because, of course, he's talking to the very brigade that BBC was describing as Nazi a few years ago. And what does he want? He wants to ramp up the war. Well, where's it heading? Let's have a look at some of the headlines being reported because, of course, we've got Joe Biden himself saying, yes, American weapons should be available for attacks within Russian territory. We've got this report here by De Welt. Germany says Ukraine can use its weapons to strike Russian territory. Italy says no, so some dissent, but the overall war hawks are pushing for more war in Ukraine. NATO is certainly pushing for more weapons and weapons to be used to attack Russia. Sweden jumping in as a relatively small country, to say use the weapons. David Cameron, of course, a war hawk from many weeks ago when he was caught saying that, yes, we should be attacking Russian soil directly. And then, of course, the Times here starting to ask the key question, will Putin go nuclear if Western weapons hit targets in Russia? I think that's extremely unlikely because at the end of the day, nobody knows the result of a major nuclear war. Nevertheless, it appears to me that Russia is consistently being goaded by the West, and this is going to lead to problems. Now, something that happened a few days ago, Mike did comment on it in the UK column News, but I just want to repeat what was happening, and this was the fact that Ukraine had used drones to attack the Russian early warning system. And the early warning system, of course, is to provide Russia with warning of a potential nuclear attack. If you destroy this system and Russia is blind, then Russia must assume that the next thing that will happen is a nuclear attack on Russian soil. But here we are with the West clearly helping the Ukrainians to undertake this very, very dangerous form of attack on Russia. Bloomberg here saying Ukraine claims a second hit on Russian missile early warning radar. The distance here is important, 1,120 miles east of Ukraine itself. And in my opinion, this can only happen with the full support of the West. And the Kiev Post here really not reporting the reality of what's going on. It's talking about US Air Force Global Hawk drones, and it says sea drones strike sinking Russian warships watched by Global Hawk. Well, of course, the Hawk wasn't just watching, it was doing all sorts of things because these machines are sucking in all sorts of information from video, from signals intelligence, from radar, electronic warfare. These are effectively a battlefield in the sky. So what was happening? Ukraine did manage to sink two very small Russian boats by using sea drones. But here we've got in red at the bottom of your screen, the main track of the American drones. And of course, this would undoubtedly have been providing Ukraine with the targeting. So if we sum a bit of this up very quickly, US, UK, NATO are providing the intelligence, the signals intelligence, the satellite area and localized battlefield surveillance, command and control, communications, electronic warfare and targeting. This is not just being done by Ukraine, that's a nonsense. The US, the UK and NATO are pumping in the weapons and the munitions. They are also using the Ukrainian, in inverted commas, Russian war as a live testing ground for current and future weapons and systems, so very cruel and cynical. And at the end of the day, it's left to Ukraine to provide those troops who are literally cannon fodder for those immense explosions that you've seen in the video. And where are the deaths? We think somewhere between 400,000 and 500,000 on the Ukrainian side. But of course, nobody in the West is reporting that. So where do we move from that? Should it be that we're talking about Tony Blair? We've seen Boris, but Blair is the man, of course, who was winding up war in the Middle East all those years ago.
Absolutely, yes. We need a moment of national renewal, and who better to step into the breach than Tony Blair, who's just issued over the past couple of days a new report calling for a new national purpose. A new national purpose is a very profound statement. We're going to harness data for health. Right. So what is this all about? The UK has a unique opportunity to become a world leader in the use of health data to drive research and innovation. Realising these public benefits requires the NHS to collaborate with the right partners, public sector organisations, non-profits, academia and private companies without compromising its core principle that healthcare must remain free at the point of use. So this is a public-private marketplace paid for with your taxes, where the pharmaceutical industry is able to experiment on the British public algorithmically, automatically across this data platform. And this is going to be our new national purpose, according to Tony Blair, who is the man pulling the strings behind Keir Starmer. What are the 4 recommendations? So one is setting up a national data trust by 2026 as a company owned by the government and the NHS with co-investment from industry. They're looking for £150 million of external investment, which means industry will own this core national asset, will have part ownership in this core national asset. Number 2, consolidating other existing health data access points, so making this the single source of truth for patient data across the entire integrated health system. Number 3, creating a coherent clinical trials service by integrating the efforts of National Institute for Health and Care Research and NHS England. So this is very much about trials. This is about the pharmaceutical industry first and foremost. And finally, amending legislation on data controllership within the NHS to move away from the current model where general practitioners are the sole controllers of a lot of patient data. So this is about putting more power into the hands of the system administrators and taking it away ultimately from clinicians working on the front lines, and as an extension of that, of patients as well. Now, not wishing to put the cart before the horse, they also issued a target operating model for the new platform. So this is a detailed document that came with the report, which explains exactly how you'd build it, has detailed technical architecture, a roadmap for implementation, recommendations for how to overcome objections and move this through the regulatory process, and ultimately put this outside of the control of elected politicians and into the hands of this public-private consortium that they want to run this system. Now, this all sounds quite suspect, so Blair has sent an emissary to assuage our concerns and convince us that this is actually a good thing. Let's have a little listen to what he has to say.
The NHS is not savvy enough to use data properly. I don't think that's true. Certain sensitive types of data should be off limits for commercial purposes. Absolutely, that is the right thing to say. When we talk about the use of health data, there are certainly use cases that are so sensitive that we should really just not have it on the table. For example, for insurance companies to have access to health data that might lead to adverse outcomes. So we need to set out the right guardrails for different kind of users when they want to access health data to make sure that public is protected at all costs. Commercialization will only ever have a negative impact on public trust. It depends on how you do it, because if you do it wrong, not engaging with the public, not really being transparent, not making sure that public concerns are properly addressed before you move forward, then obviously whatever you're going to do is going to risk losing public trust. The TBI proposal here is very attentive to that. The NHS is not savvy enough to use data properly. I don't think that's true, because we need to give a lot of credit to the NHS in terms of how they are really trying quite hard to make sure that this works. So the Data for R&D program and the ongoing initiative for secure data environment is a good example of that. The UK is already attentive to the question of how to make better use of the data resource to drive better health outcomes and innovations. And to accelerate that, the government needs to pay more attention to it so that there's more political awareness, and then it needs more resources. TBI's proposal here is to try to think of a way that can radically use NHS's resources to deliver outcomes that would benefit the population. And it really builds on what NHS is doing right now.
So we have a foreign national, I believe, Henry Lee. I believe he's Chinese, policy strategist. I think he appears to be like early 30s. Right? This is a very, very young guy. He's been at the Blair Institute for just under 2 years. He started off as policy lead for the Global Health Security Consortium, focusing on adult vaccination, pandemic preparedness and response. Terrifying. And then he's now become the senior policy advisor for policy and politics. Can you be a policy advisor for policy? That's a bit odd, isn't it? But anyway, he's here to talk about our new national purpose, Britain's new national purpose. He's all about health, biotech, industrial strategy, and really crucially, let's be honest, capital markets reform. I'm not feeling particularly reassured.
I'm certainly not. And I'll just say, somebody in the chat box said, well, nobody's taking notice of Tony Blair. The problem is that many of people in the wider public are not listening to Tony Blair, but they need to be, because, of course, he's describing the sorts of policies that are going to affect all of our lives if we allow him to get away with it. So absolutely, we should all be watching Tony Blair. Thank you for that, Ben. Debbie, let's bring you back in. And what have you got?
That this is a collaborative effort between Professor Diane Rasmussen-McCaddy and Cheryl Granger, because originally we are looking at antimicrobial resistance, and we're going to be looking at a lot more of it in the future. But this is where we need UKC Verify, and we need Diane. So I'm just going to throw this out there. Is antibiotic resistance fake news? And I'm going to use this as an example, because have we become antibiotic resistant? Are the public being blamed for overuse and demanding too many antibiotics? How much of this antimicrobial resistance narrative is actually genuine? So, well, Prince William thinks it's very genuine. In fact, Prince William thinks it's so serious, and he says that antimicrobial resistance jeopardizes the well-being of future generations. So much so that he's become patron of an appeal to create the Fleming Centre. So what is the Fleming Centre and the Fleming Initiative? Well, when we go to look at what the Fleming Initiative is, it says that it wants to keep antibiotics working for the next 100 years. 100 years keeping antibiotics working. However, what I would say is keep tuned for future broadcasts, because we're going to be looking at what antibiotics? So who are they partnered with, the Fleming Centre? Well, I just want to make you aware of this, and please note Imperial, right? So this is very important. Moving on. So Imperial College Healthcare are teamed up with Fleming. So just take note of that. Now, Prince William's support for Fleming has continued, but interestingly, it looks like he's put a time limit on it, because he says he's going to support it for the next 5 years, which seems extraordinary that he's put a time limit on it, but he has. So let's go and see who's in the leadership, because it's always interesting to see who leads these organisations. And we've got Lord Darcy, which I'm sure in future programmes, Ben and Brian will be saying heaps about Lord Darcy. We've got Professor Tim Orchard, who's a gastroenterologist physician, and Professor Hugh Brady, who's the president of Imperial. But as we go and look at the senior team, it gets a little bit more interesting. And there you see our very own David Halpern. And you think, well, what is David Halpern doing with regards to antimicrobial resistance? Well, we'll come on to a bit more of that in a minute. And there we have our good friend, Dame Sally Davis, the UK Special Envoy for Antimicrobial Resistance. We've spoken about her before, Professor Alison Holmes and Professor Mary Ryan. And so this is very interesting, actually, because just recently, when it comes to behavioural science, I have to say that we're going to talk a little bit about David Halpern and what he's up to now. But for people that don't know, Professor Diane Rasmussen McCaddy, who is on Twitter at DianeUKC, is now in contact with the very own Dark Master of Cambridge, Professor Sander van der Linden. So when it comes to behaviour, I think Diane is going to be bringing us some exclusives because she is now in direct contact with him. So when we look at what David Halpern is doing with regarding to this Fleming initiative, it's CHAIN. Well, what is CHAIN? CHAIN, Content Health and AMR Innovation Network, the new media network that's been led by Fleming. This is all about behaviour change. This is all about tackling the spread of drug-resistant microbes known as AMR. But they talk about partnering experts in entertainment, in experts in communication. So are we actually looking at new trusted messengers? I think we might be. But even more interesting, there's going to be this mass video message put out in September 2024 when the United Nations are having their very own summit on antimicrobial resistance. So our social media and our television screens are going to get bombarded. So this is what we've got looking forward to. So I just want to take you to one of David Halpern's papers that you can read. This is a behavioural science written by him, and you can see the abstract is talking about nudging antimicrobial stewardship. Well, we'll be talking more about that in future programmes because you've got to make a pledge now to the UK HSA that you won't use antibiotics. Good hand hygiene, so more sanitizer. Doesn't that please everyone? And hospital visitor compliance as well, not to mention meat is, we mustn't give antibiotics to animals, so let's not forget the animals. So that's part of the team. But then I was really surprised to go further on in the team because I see three more faces. Rachel Davis, who is Lord Darcy's Chief of Staff, Dr. Emily Scott-Deering, who's curator, and there's Professor Graham Cook, Vice Dean of Imperial Lead Infection AMR. Now, I want to remind you who Graham Cook is because I'm very familiar with Professor Graham Cook because he is actually the interim co-chair of the MHRA. Isn't that convenient? So I went to have a look. There's a little a resume that will just confirm that he is the interim chair of the MHRA. So I went to look at his declaration of interest because I thought, oh, that's strange. I don't remember ever seeing the Fleming initiative put on his declaration of interests. So when we go to look at February 2024, we can see that he's declared Imperial, he's declared Pfizer, Sanofi. I mean, you know, this is huge conflicts of interest, everybody. I know that you're all going to be gasping at the fact that he's being paid by Pfizer and the likes of Sanofi, but this is the truth, he is. But there's no mention of Fleming there. So I went to YouTube because I thought, well, I'll check out the transcript of the last board meeting that was actually published. So the next slide, you'll see a picture of the YouTube that I actually went to, just so that you can see that there's nothing mentioned. And then I thought, well, this is strange. So the Fleming initiative, well, who else are they in collaboration with? Well, I thought, you know what, I'm going to write to the MHRA. I'm just going to ask them why these declaration of interests haven't been declared. So I sent them an email, as you can see there. I won't read it all out, but it's just saying, basically, if you could let us know why he's not declared this by last night, so we would be able to broadcast today, we'd be grateful. And we got a lovely reply from Jamie at the news desk to say, for background, the Fleming Centre is a collaboration between Imperial College NHS and Imperial College. Therefore, it's covered under the Imperial College Declaration on Professor Cook's Declaration of Interest list. So I thought, well, this is interesting. And I think I'm going to have to go back to Jamie again. And I think that Diane is going to have to be doing some fact checking, because I've now found out that GlaxoSmithKline are also funding the Fleming Initiative to fight antimicrobial resistance. And I thought, wow, that's interesting. How much money are they putting into it? Well, they're putting in a nice eye-watering 45 million and to tackle AMR. But oddly, last week at the MHRA board meeting, a little anomaly happened. Have a listen to this, and just it literally blink and you'll miss it. But this was picked up at last week's MHRA board meeting, exclusive.
Questions from board. Don't be shy, or I'll have to ask about AMR.
What was all that about? Some weird looks and little grins. And why is he even mentioning AMR? Because it wasn't on the agenda. He hasn't declared it. And now that he's involved in AMR, technically the MHRA board meeting should be like musical chairs and everybody should be getting up and walking out. But I've never seen anybody walk out of an MHRA board meeting. So I went to the Declaration of Interest of January 2023. I trawled back all of the MHRA database and I found out where he did declare his interests in Imperial. And here it is. So you'll see there, Professor Graham Cook, he has declared that he's updated his declaration due to involvement in a project between Imperial College Healthcare Partners and Pfizer. So he's declared Pfizer and Imperial College. But I don't remember hearing it on the board meeting because I listened to every board meeting. I've been to every board meeting. I don't remember him declaring it. So I went back to the original board meeting and I had a listen and I can't hear it. And I think we might have a clip of it.
So if we just move on to page number 3 and look at the declarations of interest, can I just ask board members if there are any new declarations that have already not been declared? So I'm not seeing anybody raising any points there. So on that basis, can I assume that the register is accurate? Okay. Having reviewed that register, I've concluded that there's no reason to ask anybody to step out of the meeting for any of the items, and I'm therefore proposing that no further mitigations are required. Can I just check everyone's content with that? Thank you. Okay.
That's strange, don't you think? That it's written in the minutes, but in the corresponding video, there's no mention of it at all. So I went to their policy, the MHRA policy on declaring and managing interests for members of the MHR Unitary Board. Now, I know that many of our viewers and listeners, you've all been members of boards before probably, and you've been asked for conflicts of interest, or maybe you've even chaired boards. So I'd really like your advice on this, because this policy, it says responsible officer Stephen Lightfoot. Well, Stephen Lightfoot left nearly a year ago, so it obviously hasn't been updated. It says the next review date is due January 2024. Well, we are now nearly June 2024, and there is no update. But what does the policy actually say? I'm not going to read out everything that it says, but it basically says that if members become aware of a matter in which discussion at board meetings could be regarding as affecting their impartiality, they must alert the board secretary. And also they say that, you know, if an issue does arise for discussion, they have to excuse themselves. But I have never seen anybody leave the MHRA board meeting. And the conflicts of interest are wide and very varied. Not one person has ever got up and left. And I want to remind everybody too as well, the MHRA is 86% funded by the pharmaceutical company. So I'm not quite sure what exactly has been going on at the MHRA. Do you call this transparency? Because what I would also say about Professor Graham Cook is he's declared Sanofi. And I know that Sanofi makes sodium valproate. And I know that he's never excused himself from the room when sodium valproate is being discussed. So there are a lot more questions, a lot more examples to bring forward. And I think Professor Diane Rasmussen-McCaddy And Cheryl and I are going to be very busy moving forward. Is this the next behavioural PSYOP moving forward?
Detailed and comprehensive investigation, really. In the comments, I can already see people saying, my goodness, this is a major scandal, which of course it is. And it's around our health and our safety at the hands of the pharmaceutical companies. So I think a lot more work to be done. But of course, the more people who are awake to what's happening, the better our position to get it stopped. And I would also say replace some of these people from their official posts. Unfortunately, we're out of time, so we're going to have to leave it there. Ben, thank you very much for your report. Debbie, thank you. Big thank you to our guest, James Roguski. Another excellent report. We will be back in a few minutes for extra time. We're going to be talking a little bit about how people approach the UK column. We get some wonderful emails, some tremendous information from most people. There are a couple of people who think that they can get engaged with the UK column by attempting to bully us and pressurise us. And I was very disappointed that this happened recently with a man who says he is an ex-policeman. But we're going to discuss that in Extra, UK column Extra, in just a few moments. To our worldwide audience, thank you very much for joining us. We will be back for another News Monday next week. But if you're a member of UK column, stay with us for UK column Extra. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.